Silicon Valley has a new enemy, maybe an old new enemy. Evgeny Morozov, the author of To Save Everything, Click Here, New York Times columnist and general all-round bad boy. Evgeny, welcome back to TechCrunch TV.
Good to be back.
So Evgeny, in a minute or two, this book, To Save Everything, Click Here, it's your latest assault on Silicon Valley. What are you saying in it?
Well, I think Silicon Valley takes on an increasingly political role in our world, and a lot of people, including people in Silicon Valley, are excited about its potential to solve problems that have nothing to do with technology, problems that range from improving politics to solving climate change to helping us deal with the obesity epidemic. And Google, Facebook, a lot of the people in the Valley are excited about building apps for solving those problems. And I'm very critical of many of those efforts for a whole bunch of reasons that have to do with politics, that have to do with morality, and that have to do with the sort of inherent conservatism of many of the fixes that they propose. So it's an attack on what I call solutionism. And solutionism is this tendency to identify problems as problems based solely on the fact that we have nice and clean technological solutions available for solving those problems. And actually, I make a case for imperfection. I think that we need to rediscover things like hypocrisy, opacity, ambiguity, imperfection, and we need to understand why they matter. And we need to defend those things from the assault of all sorts of perfectionist impulses that come from the Valley.
Are you a hypocrite?
Yes. And I think it's a good thing.
And you're imperfect?
I am imperfect, and I hope to stay imperfect. And I wrote a book that some people would say imperfect, and I think it's a good thing. It will make for a terrible TED Talk, because complexity is imperfect. Complexity of human interaction is imperfect. You cannot be consistent all the time. You shouldn't aspire to build apps that will tell you that today you've been lying to 5 people for 5 minutes.
Well, you certainly can't lecture me on consistency. So Evgeny, are you saying then that Silicon Valley is a scam? Is everyone here telling the world they're improving it and laughing all the way to the bank, or do they really believe this stuff?
Some of them do. Some of them do it for money. Some of them build smart forks.
Be more specific. Some. Who are the guys laughing all the way to the bank? Who are actually scamming?
It's hard. Again, it depends on what you mean by scamming. They have solutions to offer.
Zuckerberg, for example. Zuckerberg claims that he's improving the world.
I think he believes in it. That's the scary part. I think he genuinely believes in the fact that his contribution to the world is positive. He's building a platform, and through that platform, he can go and solve some of the world's greatest problems. That's his exact quote. I genuinely believe that he actually means that, and that's what terrifies me the most. So
and Sheryl Sandberg?
Well, her too. I mean, she's probably far less utopian in that she doesn't come from the world of technology as such. I mean, she spent a lot of time in the Valley, but she's not a professional, developer. She doesn't really have many ideas that people like Zuckerberg have when it comes to the values of openness as derived from open source software, or many of the debates that people in the Valley are subject to. So again, it's not an argument that I'm trying to go and bash Silicon Valley or to indict it. I'm not interested. I'm interested in how we as a public choose to solve problems that matter and choose to ignore problems that don't. And this is where this public-private partnership between a lot of policymakers in Washington and Silicon Valley gets really tricky. That's something I explored in the first book when I talked about internet freedom and liberating Iran with social media and liberating China with Twitter and Facebook. That's something I continue to explore, but more in the domestic context. What are some of the problems that Silicon Valley can help us solve? What are some of the problems that we need to be solving politically? And what are the costs of having Silicon Valley solve a problem like obesity or climate change?
I'm guessing that there is a kind of, in your work, there is a backhanded compliment to Silicon Valley in the sense you're acknowledging that technology is more and more central in public policy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not just central to public policy. I just think that Silicon Valley has built an infrastructure for problem solving. They've built sensors that we carry with us on our smartphones. They managed to build what we now refer to as social. You can carry your friends anywhere you go. And since you carry your friends anywhere you go, you can engage in all sorts of new tricks with regards to peer pressure. Now, if you don't recycle, your friends can see it and tell you that you need to recycle.
I hope you're recycling, right?
I don't, actually.
You don't?
It's one of the hypocritical moves that I consistently make in being inconsistent. But my point is that Silicon Valley is important. It has built an infrastructure that is very tempting to start using. Now that people are wearing smart Google glasses, right, you can actually make it so that whenever you order a soda drink, that soda drink appears larger than it actually is, so that you'll feel fuller sooner, and that's what researchers in Japan are doing. All sorts of manipulation and tinkering become possible through this new technologically mediated infrastructure. And this is where I think we need to understand the limits of perfection. Do we want to be fighting obesity by tricking people into thinking that the portions they order are actually larger than they actually are? Or is it the kind of manipulation that is not fair to engage in politics?
Your work is very critical of positive thinking. Is there a particular thinker who's inspired you, whose school you feel you're in? Postman?
I wouldn't know. No,
Huxley?
again, no, well, I go with obscure. I go with a lot of obscure thinkers. I go with a lot of obscure sociologists.
Well, give me a couple.
I mean, Bruno Latour, Peter Galison. Those are not people that are well known. Those are people who tackle very small. Maybe Michel Foucault would be one. Again, they're not necessarily in Foucault's case, he's not necessarily a theorist of technology, but how he thinks about genealogies of ideas. What Foucault does for sexuality, I think, would be great to do for something like innovation or something like openness. I mean, you need to go and understand the origins of many of the ideas and buzzwords that we take for granted.
You've built a reputation for being very, not only critical of Silicon Valley and technological perfectionism, but also of individuals. You wrote recently that the enduring emptiness of our tech debates has one main cause, and his name is Tim O'Reilly. Mm-hmm. Say something about O'Reilly, but also say something about the way in which you go after these individuals. Does it give you satisfaction? Do you think it's appropriate?
I think it's perfectly appropriate, again, in part because I don't think of them as individuals. I think of them as thinkers. And I think it's perfectly okay to engage with people whose ideas are supposed to have some consistency in them and to try to go to read their readings closely. It's not that I go after O'Reilly because I don't like the jams that he makes in his spare time. I don't go after him because I don't like the way he dresses. I go after him because his ideas, I think, have enormous influence in Silicon Valley. Many of those ideas are not well thought throughout. Many of them actually ugly if you start analyzing them politically. And what I do is try to do close readings of things that are not meant to be read very closely. And that's why
you didn't do that with Jeff Jarvis. It seemed you had a notorious piece a year ago, in which you seemed intent on destroying his reputation. It went beyond his ideas.
Well, I mean, occasionally some of those pieces go beyond. Doesn't mean that
was
they
that
engage.
inappropriate? Do you think?
No, I think it was perfectly
you went after Jeff. I mean, I'm a critic like you of his ideas.
Yeah.
But I think you crossed the line there. You don't think that's fair?
No, I think it's perfectly fair. Again, and I would be okay with people doing that to me. I mean, the debates we've been having about technology have been corrupted by so much power wielding by the likes of O'Reilly. They've been corrupted by buzzwords that mean completely nothing. They've been corrupted by blogs that run as newsletters attached to venture capitalist firms. I mean, the whole debate is nonsense. And and to engage in niceties now is a luxury. We don't have that luxury.
Okay, well, what's so bad about O'Reilly? What does he say that's so corrosive?
I mean, in the case of O'Reilly, it's a very long 16,000-word piece. I mean, if I could summarize it in a tweet, I would do a tweet.
Yeah, but you've got 2 minutes. Tell me why O'Reilly is so bad. What's so wrong about what he says?
Well, again, this is a complex matter. You have to go and understand how my problem with O'Reilly is that he's very clever at manipulating language. He's very clever at introducing ambiguity into debates that used to be very sharp. So he would take an idea like open government, which used to mean something very specific, and the openness of open government referred to ideas like responsibility and transparency. It was all about holding governments accountable. Now, partly with his intervention, open government means releasing government data in formats that are easy to take and build into mashups, that are easy to transport, that are liquid. You want to release your data in formats that are friendly to developers. So if the government of North Korea decides to be open, all they need to do is to release any sort of data that they want in formats that are, that are not in PDF. You want data that can feed databases and it can go into APIs, and all of that is great. But this is a very different definition of openness than we traditionally had when we talked about open government. So how those linguistic substitutions happen, I think matters. Tracing how they happen matters, because ultimately you have a government like the Brits, your government, right? Your former government, that now proclaims to be a champion of open government, while at the same time saying that freedom of information requests are filling up the arteries of government, and want to actually start charging people potentially for asking for freedom of information requests. And they are at the same time claiming to be champions of openness. How did that happen? Well, it happens because the British government releases certain trivial data in open formats, so they can tick the openness box while being very close and untransparent.
Well, there you have it. I had Evgeny on the show because I knew he was going to insult Jeff Jarvis and Tim O'Reilly, but I never thought he would get onto the British government. But he's done it. He's offensive. He's brilliant. Evgeny Morozov, congratulations. The new book, To Save Everything, click here, and you'll have to have an armed escort out of the TechCrunch office. Thank you again.
Bodyguards, yes, thanks.